Okay, so I just want to make a correction that was brought to my attention once again about the statements that I made concerning Paul. When these individuals that came up here, they asked if Paul was in the Gentile state of mind, and I said yes, but I took that out of context. I didn't really get to fully explain myself, um, so it sounded weird, but what I said was really out of context. It wasn't correct. And we kind of moved on, and I didn't get to explain what I wanted to explain. What I was really going into, I was just referring to what Paul was doing during before his conversion, pre-conversion, right? And I suggest you just look at the history of Paul. Uh, we know that Paul was famous. You know, the famous story of Saint Paul's conversion from being an outrageous persecutor of the gospel of Yahushua's church, from him turning into an illustrious professor and preacher of Yahushua, you know. So you got to go into the history of Paul, and I was just looking at what Paul did before his conversion. That's what I was referring to. You know, he was in a wicked state, right? And also, Paul, he was not, he knew who he was. He knew who he was. Okay, he knew he was an Israelite. His father and mother were both native Israelites. Okay, native Jews. Okay, so-called Jews. All right, and using that term. And he was from the tribe of Benjamin. He stated that in the scriptures. He had an education. You know, he was educated in the schools of Tarsus and a little bit in Athens. He was acquainted with philosophy and poetry of the Greeks. We know that. Okay. He was also tutored by Gamaliel. Okay. All right. So he knew he was well learned. You know, he knew the laws. He went to school. He had understanding. Okay. He knew he was an Israelite. I wasn't trying to say that he wasn't an Israelite, and I noticed the comment boards, they went off. Okay, what I was referring to was what he was doing before he converted. And I was comparing that to how the Gentiles were. That's what I was trying to do. And then people just jumped on me, and rightfully so, man, because it didn't sound good, right? But that's what I was trying to refer to, but I didn't get a chance to do that because we went into something else, okay? So I want to make that correction. Now I'm going to get some precepts. Okay. Because we know that Saul, which is Paul, you know, he made havoc of the church. You know, he was dragging off men and women and committing them to prison. Right. He was against the church. Right. And that's what I was referring to. So I'm going to get that account here. So this is Acts chapter 8 and 1. And Saul persecutes the church. And Saul was consenting unto his death. And at that time there was a great persecution unto the church which was at Jerusalem. And they were all scattered abroad throughout the regions of Judea and Samaria, except the apostles. And devout men carried Stephen to his burial and made great lamentation over him. As for Saul, he made havoc of the church, entering into every house and hauling men and women, committed them to prison. Okay, so that shows you that. Okay, and that's what I was referring to. You know, he was in a bugged out state of mind to do that. Okay, and this is before he converted. So that's what I was going into. I was just comparing Paul to the Gentiles on how they were acting before they converted, because we all fell short. I was just comparing that, but how I said it didn't sound right. You understand me? Okay. Now let's get the next precept. This is Acts chapter 9, verse 1. The conversion of Saul. Okay. And Saul, yet breathing out threatenings and slaughter against the disciples of the Lord, went on to the high priest. And that's what he did. Right? He threatened and he hurt the disciples of the Lord. That's just what it is. Okay? And desired of him letters to Damascus, to the synagogues, that if he found any of this, whether they were men or women, he might bring them bound onto Jerusalem. All right? And when you go down, you see how he converted and he changed. All right? The Spirit of the Lord started speaking to him, and he woke up, and he found out, he woke up to what he was doing, and then he converted. Okay? So you can read that you can read that for yourself, but I just wanted to make a correction with what was stated over here when these individuals came up, because I took things out of context and it sounded choppy because I didn't get to finish what I was going to go into, right? So yeah, sorry if I confuse any, sorry if it looked bad, sorry if I upset you, but these things are going to happen. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to say things out of context. And I thank you for correcting me and bringing that out. But I wasn't trying to sow confusion. I wasn't trying to cause confusion. Salakia. All right. So anyways, with that, just want to give all praises, glory, and honor due unto Yahweh, Bahashem Yahushai, Bahashem Rakahah Kodash, and double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Shalom.